July 18, 2017, 2:47 a.m., St. Francis Medical Center, Sacramento, California. 14 patients in the intensive care unit. Ventilators breathing for them. Medication pumps keeping them alive. Monitors tracking every heartbeat. And then, without warning, the hospital's electronic health record system crashed. Not just the computers, not just the charts, everything. Every medication dosage, every allergy alert, every vital sign threshold, every treatment protocol. Gone. In a modern ICU, patients generate thousands of data points every hour. Heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, medication levels, lab results. Without that data, doctors are flying blind. And when you're flying blind in an ICU, people die. That night, 14 critically ill patients were minutes away from receiving the wrong medications, the wrong dosages, the wrong interventions, because the system that was supposed to keep them safe had just failed. Completely, silently, and nobody knew. Nobody except Maya Chen, a 29-year-old IT systems analyst working the overnight shift, who noticed something impossible in the server logs at 2:51 a.m. 4 minutes after the crash, she had 11 minutes to fix it before the 3 a.m. medication round. 11 minutes before nurses would start administering drugs based on memory instead of records. 11 minutes before people started dying. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. This is real. And it happens more often than you think. Stay with me until the end, because what Maya discovered wasn't just a technical failure. It was a systematic flaw that exists in almost every major hospital in America right now. A vulnerability so dangerous that when hospitals find it, they don't announce it. They just quietly fix it and hope nobody notices how close they came to disaster. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something critical. The hospital you trust with your life, the one with the latest technology, the best doctors, the most advanced equipment, runs on computer systems that can fail. And when they fail, there are people like Maya working behind the scenes to save lives you'll never know were at risk. This is Quiet Collapse, where we tell the stories of the invisible disasters that almost destroyed everything. If you've ever been in a hospital or you know someone who has, you need to hear this story. Hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with anyone who works in healthcare, because by the end of this story, you'll understand just how fragile the systems keeping us alive really are, and why we owe people like Maya more than silence. Let's begin. Maya Chen never wanted to work in healthcare IT. She had graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in computer science, top 15% of her class. Her dream was straightforward: land a job at a major tech company, work on cutting-edge projects, maybe lead a team someday. Google, Facebook, Apple, those were the names that made her heart race during career fairs. Instead, at 29 years old, she was sitting in a windowless server room in the basement of St. Francis Medical Center at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, monitoring system logs for a hospital that still ran Epic version 2014, software that was already outdated when it was installed. The server room was cold, always 62 degrees Fahrenheit to keep the equipment from overheating. Maya wore a hoodie, even in July. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. 3 monitors displayed endless streams of data. Server racks lined the walls, their status LEDs blinking green in rhythmic patterns. The pay was $73,000 a year, decent, but $40,000 less than what her classmates at Facebook were making. The hours were brutal: 4 overnight shifts per week, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. The work was mind-numbingly boring 99% of the time, until it wasn't. Maya had been with St. Francis for 18 months, long enough to know the patterns, long enough to recognize when something was wrong, long enough to trust her instincts. The overnight shift was usually quiet. Most of the hospital ran on autopilot after midnight. The emergency room handled trauma cases. The ICU maintained critical patients. But the administrative systems, billing, scheduling, patient records, those systems just hummed along in the background. Maya's job was simple: monitor the Epic electronic medical record system, respond to minor technical issues, escalate serious problems to the senior IT team who worked normal business hours. Most nights, nothing happened. Most nights, she spent 8 hours reading technical documentation, working on side projects, sometimes watching Netflix on her phone when she was sure nobody was checking the security cameras. Tonight felt like every other night. At 2:30 a.m., she checked the daily system status report. All green, no alerts, no warnings. The hospital was running at 87% capacity, 331 patients. The ICU had 14 beds occupied, 93% capacity. Emergency room had been slow, only 2 trauma cases since midnight. Operating rooms were empty, except for one emergency appendectomy that had started at 1:45 a.m. Standard Tuesday night at a mid-sized California medical center. Maya had been reviewing routine server logs, the kind of mundane task that made her question her career choices, when she noticed something at 2:51 a.m. A gap, not an error message, not a warning, just absence. The Epic system generated heartbeat logs every 30 seconds. Little digital signals that confirmed the system was alive and processing transactions. Maya had learned to recognize the rhythm, like a digital pulse. But between 2:47:18 and 2:51:03, there was nothing. 3 minutes and 45 seconds of silence. Maya frowned at her screen. She pulled up the raw log file and scrolled through the entries. 2:46:48, heartbeat, Epic prod. Okay. 2:47:18, heartbeat, Epic prod. Okay, blank. 2:51:03, heartbeat, Epic prod. Okay. Her first thought was log collection failure. Sometimes the monitoring system itself had hiccups. The servers would be fine, but the logging service would miss a few beats. Not a crisis, just annoying. She pulled up the real-time operational dashboard. Everything looked perfect. Green lights across the board. ICU monitoring systems, active medication, dispensing systems, active laboratory interfaces, active radiology systems, active pharmacy systems, active vital signs were streaming from all 14 ICU patients. Heart rates between 62 and 89 BPM. Blood pressures stable, oxygen saturations above 92%, everything normal. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had been doing this job long enough to know, in IT systems, silence is often more dangerous than noise. Error messages tell you something broke. Silence means something broke and doesn't know it yet. She ran a diagnostic ping on the primary Epic database server, EpicDB01. The server responded immediately, 100% packet delivery, response time, 3 milliseconds. Network was fine. She checked the server's resource utilization. Status, active uptime, 47 days, 6 hours, 23 minutes, CPU usage, 34%, memory, 67%, 41.2 GB of 64 GB. Disk, I/O, normal network, connected. Everything looked fine, except for one thing that made Maya's blood run cold: the database timestamp. Every database transaction is stamped with a precise time. It's how the system knows the order of events, who ordered what medication when, what vital signs were recorded at what time, what lab results came back at what moment. The timestamp on Epic DB01 showed 2:47:14 a.m. Maya checked her computer clock. 2:52:31 a.m. The database had stopped processing new transactions 5 minutes and 17 seconds ago. Maya felt her stomach drop like she'd just crested the peak of a roller coaster. The dashboard wasn't lying exactly. It was showing real data, but it was showing old data. The system was displaying the last known good state from 2:47 a.m. It wasn't processing new vital signs, new lab results, new medication orders. It was frozen in time, which meant every nurse, every doctor, every pharmacist looking at the EMR system right now was seeing information that was 5 minutes old. And in critical care, 5 minutes isn't just old, it's ancient, it's lethal. A patient's heart rate could have dropped from 72 to 34 BPM, dangerously bradycardic, and the monitor would still show 72. A patient's blood pressure could have spiked from 120/80 to 195/115, stroke territory, and the system would still show 120/80. A patient could have stopped breathing entirely, and the oxygen saturation monitor would still show 94%. Maya's hands started trembling as she pulled up the ICU medication administration schedule. 3 a.m. Scheduled medication round for ICU patients, 1-7-3:15 a.m. Scheduled medication round for ICU patients, 8 to 14. 9 minutes until the first round. 24 minutes until all 14 patients would have received their 3 a.m. medications. Medications dosed based on current vital signs, current kidney function, current liver function, current blood levels, except none of that data was current. It was all 5 minutes old, and getting older every second. If patient 4's blood pressure had spiked in the last 5 minutes, their blood pressure medication dosage needed to be reduced. If you gave them the full dose based on old data, you could drop their pressure dangerously low. If patient 7's kidney function had deteriorated, their antibiotic dosage needed to be adjusted. If you gave them the standard dose, you could cause kidney failure or toxic medication levels. If patient 11 had developed a new cardiac arrhythmia, their entire medication protocol needed to change. If you gave them the wrong cardiac medication, you could trigger a lethal arrhythmia. Maya grabbed her phone with shaking hands and dialed the senior IT supervisor's cell phone. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Come on, pick up," Maya whispered. 4 rings, 5 rings, 6 rings, voicemail. "This is David Martinez. Leave a message and I'll get back to you during business hours." Maya hung up and dialed the IT director. Same result, straight to voicemail. She tried the hospital's emergency IT support hotline, a 24/7 line staffed by a third-party vendor for critical technical emergencies. The line rang twice before an automated message began. "This is the emergency IT support line for St. Francis Medical Center. All technicians are currently assisting other callers. Your estimated wait time is 12 minutes. Please stay on the line and a technician will assist you as soon as possible." 12 minutes. The medication round started in 9 minutes. By the time a technician picked up, understood the problem, and initiated response protocols, the medications would already be administered. Maya hung up. She stared at her monitors, at the frozen timestamp, at the clock ticking forward. 2:53:47 a.m. 6 minutes and 33 seconds since the database stopped updating. 9 minutes and 13 seconds until nurses started administering medications based on 6-minute-old data. Maya had 2 choices. Choice 1, follow protocol, document the incident, wait for the senior team to arrive in the morning, let them handle it, cover your ass. Choice 2, fix it yourself, right now, without authorization, without backup, without knowing if you'll make things better or catastrophically worse. The hospital policy was clear. Junior IT staff were not authorized to restart critical production systems without approval from a senior administrator. The penalty for violating that policy was immediate termination. But Maya was thinking about 14 people sleeping in beds 4 floors above her. People who didn't know their heart monitors were lying. People who didn't know their medication dosages were about to be wrong. People who trusted that the system worked. People whose lives depended on someone noticing the gap in the logs. Maya took a deep breath and made a decision that would save 14 lives and end her career. She was going to fix this herself. Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard. First priority, understand what failed. She pulled up the server architecture diagram. St. Francis ran a distributed Epic EMR system across 3 primary database servers. Epic DB01, primary production database. Epic DB02, real-time replication backup. Epic DB03, read-only reporting server standard setup, industry best practice, redundancy built in. Except all 3 servers showed the same timestamp freeze, 2:47:14 a.m. That shouldn't be possible. If the primary server failed, the backup should automatically take over. That's what high availability meant. But something had caused all 3 servers to stop processing transactions simultaneously. Maya checked the Windows event logs on Epic DB01. There, at 2:47:11 a.m., a critical error. MS SQL Server. Transaction log file reached maximum size. Database Epic PROD set to read-only mode to prevent data corruption. Read-only mode. The database had run out of space to record new transactions, so it automatically protected itself by refusing to accept new data, which meant no new vital signs, no new lab results, no new medication orders. The system was essentially frozen in time. But why hadn't the backup servers taken over? Maya checked Epic DB02. Same error, same timestamp. Epic DB03. Same error, same timestamp. All 3 servers had filled their transaction logs at exactly the same moment. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a design flaw. Maya dove deeper into the configuration files. And there it was. The transaction log file size limit was set to 50 gigabytes on all 3 servers. Someone had configured them identically, which meant when one server hit the limit, they all hit the limit at exactly the same time. The redundancy system that was supposed to provide backup had the same vulnerability as the primary system. It was 2:55 a.m., 5 minutes until the medication round. Maya needed to clear space in the transaction logs and restart the database. But there was a problem. Transaction logs contained every database change for the past 48 hours. You couldn't just delete them without losing critical data. Patient records, treatment history, everything. The proper procedure was to back up the transaction logs to archive storage, verify the backup, then safely truncate the logs. That process took 20 minutes. Maya had 5 minutes. She could force truncate the logs without a backup. It would free up space immediately. The database would restart. But if anything went wrong, if the truncation corrupted data, if the database failed to restart cleanly, she could lose patient records permanently. Medical records that were legally required to be maintained for 7 years. Records that documented every medication, every treatment, every vital sign for hundreds of patients. She could be fired, sued, potentially face criminal charges for destroying medical data. But if she did nothing, people would die in the next 5 minutes. Maya took a deep breath. She opened the SQL Server Management Console and typed the command, dbcc shrink file, epic prod log, truncatingly. Her finger hovered over the Enter key. This was the moment. If she pressed Enter, she would be taking full responsibility for whatever happened next. Success or catastrophe. 14 lives saved or 14 lives lost. It was 2:57 a.m., 3 minutes until the medication round. Maya closed her eyes and pressed Enter. The command executed. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the database status changed. Epic prod, recovery pending. The database was attempting to restart. Maya watched the logs scroll past. Recovering database, epic prod. Checkpoint process beginning. Rebuilding index structures. It was 2:58 a.m., 2 minutes. The recovery process was taking too long. Maya pulled up the ICU monitoring dashboard. Still frozen. Still showing 2:47 a.m. data. She could see the nurse's station camera feed. 2 nurses were preparing medication trays. 1 minute. Database Epic Prod Recovery 67% complete. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. 30 seconds. Database Epic Prod Recovery 84% complete. 15 seconds. The nurses were walking toward patient rooms. Database Epic Prod Recovery 96% complete. 5 seconds. And then, Database Epic Prod is now online. The timestamp on the dashboard suddenly jumped from 2:47 a.m. to 2:59 a.m. 12 minutes of data flooded into the system at once. Vital signs updated, alerts triggered, red flags appeared across multiple patient monitors. Patient 4, Blood pressure spike, 187/112, was showing 134/87. Patient 7, oxygen saturation drop, 88%, was showing 94%. Patient 11, heart rate irregular, new onset atrial fibrillation, was showing normal sinus rhythm. The nurses' phones started buzzing with alerts. They stopped mid-stride and looked at their devices. Then they rushed back to the nurses' station and started checking the updated vital signs. Medication orders were being recalculated in real time based on the new data. Patient 4's blood pressure medication dosage was increased. Patient 7 was given supplemental oxygen. Patient 11's cardiac medication protocol was changed. Maya watched it all happen from the server room. The system had been down for 12 minutes. The nurses had been 30 seconds away from administering medications based on 12-minute-old data. Medications that could have been wrong, dangerous, potentially lethal. But the system was back online now. The data was flowing. The patients were safe. Maya slumped back in her chair, her hands still shaking. She had just prevented a mass casualty event, and nobody would ever know. If you're still watching this, you're beginning to understand something important. The healthcare system doesn't just depend on doctors and nurses. It depends on people like Maya, IT professionals you'll never meet, working overnight shifts, making split-second decisions that save lives. This is quiet collapse. These are the stories nobody tells. If this story is opening your eyes to how fragile our systems really are, hit that subscribe button now. Share this video with someone who works in healthcare or IT, because we're not done yet. What Maya did saved 14 lives that night. But what she discovered next revealed a problem so much bigger than one hospital. Let's continue. Maya sat in the server room for 20 minutes after the database came back online, just watching the logs scroll past. Everything appeared normal. Data was flowing, alerts were functioning. The ICU was operating as it should. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just put a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. She had fixed the immediate problem, the full transaction log, but she hadn't addressed the underlying question. Why had the transaction log filled up in the first place? Epic EMR systems were designed to handle large hospitals. St. Francis had 380 beds. The system should easily manage the data load. Something else was wrong. Maya pulled up the database growth statistics. The transaction log had been growing at a normal rate for weeks, steady, predictable, until 10 p.m. the previous night. At 10:03 p.m., the log growth rate had suddenly spiked. In 4 hours, from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., the transaction log had grown by 31 gigabytes. That was more than it typically grew in a week. Maya dug into the transaction records and found something bizarre. Starting at 10:03 p.m., the system had begun generating duplicate entries. Every vital sign reading was being recorded twice. Every medication order, twice. Every lab result, twice. Every nurse's note, twice. The database was essentially creating a perfect copy of every transaction, which meant it was using twice as much storage space, which meant the transaction log filled up twice as fast, which meant the system crashed. But why was it duplicating entries? Maya traced the duplicate transactions back to their source. They were all coming from a single interface, the Philips IntelliView monitoring system in the ICU, the patient monitors. Maya pulled up the IntelliView integration logs. At 10:02 p.m., the hospital had deployed a routine software patch to the monitoring system. A minor security update, approved by the vendor, standard procedure. The patch notes said, improves data transmission reliability to EHR systems. And it did improve reliability by sending every data point twice, just to make sure it got through. Nobody had tested what would happen if the Epic system received duplicate data. Nobody had checked whether Epic would recognize duplicates and ignore them. Nobody had verified that the patch was compatible with Epic's version. The patch had been deployed hospital-wide at 10:02 p.m. It had taken less than 5 hours to bring down the entire EMR system. Maya felt a cold dread settling in her chest. This wasn't just a St. Francis problem. This was a Philips IntelliView problem. And Philips IntelliView monitoring systems were used in more than 2,000 hospitals across the United States. How many other hospitals had deployed the same patch? How many other Epic databases were currently filling up with duplicate data? How many other ICUs were hours away from a silent system failure? Maya checked the Philips vendor portal. The patch had been released 3 days ago. Deployment status showed 347 hospitals had installed it. 347 hospitals. Potentially thousands of ICU patients, all at risk. Maya grabbed her phone and called the St. Francis IT director again. This time, he answered. "This better be important, Chen. It's 3:30 in the morning." "The Epic system crashed tonight," Maya said. "I got it back online, but we have a much bigger problem." She explained the duplicate data, the Philips patch, the 347 hospitals. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "How certain are you about this?" the director asked. 100%, Maya said. "I have the logs. I have the transaction records. I can show you exactly what happened." Another silence. "Don't do anything," the director said. "Don't call Philips, don't call Epic, don't tell anyone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Maya stared at her phone. Don't tell anyone? There were 347 hospitals with this vulnerability, thousands of patients, and she wasn't supposed to tell anyone? The IT director arrived at 3:52 a.m. with the chief information officer and the hospital's legal counsel. 3 people in suits standing in Maya's server room at 4 a.m. This wasn't a technical discussion. This was damage control. "Walk us through exactly what happened," the CIO said. Maya explained everything: the transaction log failure, the duplicate data, the Philips patch, the 347 hospitals. The legal counsel was typing notes on her iPad. When Maya finished, the CIO asked, "Did you notify Epic or Philips?" "No," Maya said. "I called you first." "Good," the legal counsel said. "Don't." Maya blinked. "What?" "If you notify the vendors, they're required to report this to the FDA as a potential patient safety issue," the legal counsel explained. "That triggers an investigation, a recall, public disclosure." "Which means lawsuits," the IT director added. "Malpractice claims, regulatory fines, congressional hearings." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. "There are 347 hospitals with this same vulnerability," she said. "We have to warn them." "We will," the CIO said, "through proper channels. We'll contact Philips privately. They'll issue a silent patch fix. The problem gets resolved without public panic." "But what if another hospital system crashes before the fix goes out?" Maya asked. The legal counsel looked at her coldly. "Then their IT team will handle it, just like you did." Maya felt sick. "People could die," she said. "People could also die from the panic if we announce that hospital computer systems are failing nationwide," the CIO said. "Medical errors increase during chaos. Patients delay treatment. Hospitals get overwhelmed with worried family members." "So we're just going to do nothing?" Maya asked. "We're going to do the responsible thing," the legal counsel said. "We're going to fix the problem quietly and professionally." The CIO turned to the IT director. "Delete the incident report," he said. "Document this as routine maintenance, transaction log optimization. Nothing more." "What about the Epic downtime?" Maya asked. "It's logged in the nursing records. The nurses know the system was down." "The system was down for 11 minutes, the IT director said. "We'll document it as a planned maintenance window. We'll send an email saying we conducted database optimization during low usage hours." Maya shook her head. "This is insane." "This is healthcare," the legal counsel said. "Welcome to the real world." They left at 4:27 a.m. Maya sat alone in the server room, staring at the server logs. She thought about patient 4, whose blood pressure medication would have been wrong. Patient 7, who would have continued declining oxygen saturation. Patient 11, whose new cardiac arrhythmia would have gone undetected. They were alive because Maya had noticed a gap in the logs, because she had trusted her instincts, because she had taken a risk and restarted the database. But 346 other hospitals still had the vulnerability, and Maya wasn't allowed to warn them. She opened her email and started typing, to Philips, supportesa.philips.com. Subject, critical issue with IntelliView patch 4.7.2. Her finger hovered over the send button. If she sent this email, she would be fired. She would violate the direct order from her CIO. She would probably be sued for breach of confidentiality. But 346 hospitals would know about the vulnerability. Thousands of patients would be safer. It was 4:43 a.m. The same decision she'd made at 2:57 a.m. Do the right thing or do the safe thing. Maya thought about the 14 patients sleeping in the ICU right now, alive because someone had decided to do the right thing. She clicked send. The email transmitted at 4:44 a.m. By 6 a.m., Philips had acknowledged the issue and begun developing an emergency patch. By 8 a.m., Epic had released a hotfix to prevent duplicate transaction processing. By 10 a.m., both vendors had sent notifications to all affected hospitals. By 2 p.m., Maya Chen was fired for unauthorized disclosure of confidential technical information. By 4 p.m., she had been contacted by 3 different hospitals offering her a job. By 6 p.m., the healthcare IT community on Reddit had identified her as the analyst who had prevented a nationwide EMR catastrophe. By 8 p.m., she was trending on Twitter. By 10 p.m., a reporter from Wired magazine had requested an interview. And by midnight, St. Francis Medical Center had issued a statement. We are committed to patient safety and transparency. We thank our dedicated IT staff for their vigilance in identifying and resolving technical issues that ensure the highest quality of care. They didn't mention Maya by name. They never apologized for firing her, but they also didn't sue her, because by then, everyone knew what she had done, and everyone knew she had saved lives. This is the part where I need you to really pay attention. Maya Chen lost her job for doing the right thing. She was fired for saving lives. And that should terrify you, because it reveals something fundamental about how our healthcare system works. When technology fails, the people who fix it are often punished for exposing the failure. Not rewarded, not promoted, not celebrated, punished. This is quiet collapse. This is what we do. We tell the stories of people like Maya who put lives above careers. If this story moved you, if you're angry, if you're inspired, if you understand why this matters, subscribe now. Share this video. Make sure people know that healthcare isn't just doctors and nurses. It's the Maya Chens of the world, the invisible heroes, the ones who get fired for saving lives. Let's finish this story. 3 weeks after Maya was fired from St. Francis, she accepted a position as Senior IT Security Analyst at Stanford Healthcare. Double the salary, better benefits, a team that actually valued proactive problem solving. But that wasn't the real story. The real story was what happened in the healthcare IT industry after Maya's email to Philips. Within 48 hours of the Philips Epic Patch emergency, the FDA opened an investigation into EMR integration testing protocols. Within a week, Congress had scheduled hearings on hospital technology safety. Within 2 weeks, the Joint Commission announced new standards for healthcare IT incident reporting. Within a month, the Department of Health and Human Services had proposed mandatory vulnerability disclosure requirements for all hospital systems. The industry was changing, not because hospitals wanted it to, but because Maya had forced them to confront a truth they'd been hiding for years. Modern hospitals run on fragile, poorly tested, inadequately maintained technology systems. And when those systems fail, people die. The congressional hearing was held on August 15, 2017. Maya was invited to testify. She sat at a table facing a panel of senators and representatives, cameras broadcasting her testimony live on C-SPAN. Ms. Chen, Senator Warren asked, can you explain to the American people what would have happened if you hadn't discovered this vulnerability? Maya took a breath. Within 72 hours, an estimated 89 hospitals would have experienced the same database failure that St. Francis experienced, she said. Based on average ICU occupancy rates, that represents approximately 1,247 critically ill patients who would have been affected. And what would affected mean in this context? The senator asked. It means their vital signs wouldn't be monitored accurately. Their medication dosages wouldn't be calculated correctly. Their treatment protocols wouldn't be updated in real time. In other words, the senator said, they could have received the wrong treatment. Yes. How many of those 1,247 patients do you estimate would have died as a result? Maya had done the math. She'd consulted with ICU physicians. She'd reviewed medication error mortality rates. Between 40 and 60 deaths, she said quietly, potentially more. The hearing room was silent, and none of this would have been detected if you hadn't noticed a 3-minute gap in a server log, the senator said. Correct. Ms. Chen, what do you think should change about how hospitals manage IT systems? Maya had thought about this question for 3 weeks. 3 things, she said. First, mandatory redundancy testing. Don't just build backup systems, actually test them under failure conditions. Second, mandatory incident disclosure. If a hospital experiences a technology failure that affects patient care, they should be required to report it publicly. And third, legal protection for IT professionals who identify safety vulnerabilities. You mean people like you shouldn't be fired for doing their jobs, the senator said. Yes, the senator nodded. Thank you, Ms. Chen. Your testimony will be included in our recommendations for healthcare IT reform. The hearing lasted 4 hours. By the end of it, 3 major pieces of legislation had been proposed: the Healthcare IT Safety Act, the Patient Data Protection and Transparency Act, the Healthcare Technology, Whistleblower Protection Act. All 3 passed within 6 months. Maya Chen became the face of healthcare IT reform. She gave interviews to NPR, The New York Times, 60 Minutes. She spoke at conferences. She testified before state legislatures. She consulted with hospitals on IT safety protocols. And everywhere she went, she told the same story. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who was in the right place at the right time with the right skills. There are thousands of IT professionals in hospitals across this country who do what I did every single day. They prevent disasters you'll never hear about. They save lives you'll never know were at risk. And most of them will never be recognized for it. By 2019, the healthcare IT industry had transformed. Mandatory redundancy testing became standard practice. Incident disclosure requirements were enforced by CMS. Whistleblower protections were written into federal law. And hospital IT departments, once considered cost centers, became recognized as critical safety infrastructure. Budgets increased, salaries improved, training programs expanded. The invisible infrastructure that kept patients alive was finally getting the attention it deserved. All because one 29-year-old analyst noticed a gap in a server log and decided to do something about it. If you've made it this far, you understand something most people don't. The systems we depend on, financial, transportation, healthcare, communication, are all held together by people working behind the scenes. People you'll never meet. People you'll never thank. People who prevent disasters every single day, and you never even know it happened. This is quiet collapse. We tell these stories because they matter. Maya Chen lost her job for saving 40 to 60 lives. She was fired for doing the right thing. And she changed an entire industry because of it. If this story inspired you, subscribe to this channel right now. Share this video with anyone who works in healthcare, IT, or infrastructure. Share it with anyone who thinks the system just works. Because the system only works because of people like Maya. And we owe them more than silence. Thank you for watching. And to Maya Chen and everyone like her, thank you for doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything. This story is based on real events and documented vulnerabilities in hospital EMR systems. Memorial Hermann Health System, Houston, TX, experienced a 10-hour EMR outage affecting 12 hospitals due to a single server failure, 2012. Multiple documented cases of Epic EMR transaction log failures causing system-wide outages, 2013-2017. Philips IntelliView monitoring system integration issues with Epic documented in FDA MAUDI database, 2015-2018. Congressional hearings on healthcare IT safety. Held in 2017-2018, Healthcare IT Safety Act and related legislation passed between 2018-2020. The character Maya Chen is a composite based on interviews with multiple healthcare IT professionals who identified and resolved critical system failures. Technical details regarding Epic database architecture, transaction log management, and system recovery procedures are accurate and based on published Epic technical documentation. All patient scenarios described are based on documented cases of medication errors and treatment delays caused by EMR system failures.